when Superman gets broken out of, illegal extra-dimensional jail, I was expecting Luthor to be like, not to worry, I've prepared for this contingency. Instead, he has a screaming breakdown and starts knocking shit over like an angry cat. And I was like, oh, we're starting the breakdown early.
The pick that up was so goddamn funny.
Fucking dismissive.
Just keeps knocking shit on the ground.
Yeah, I love... that is great how emotional he's getting too, because the other bit that I love on the other side of that is when he's in the first fight with the Hammer Bravia, where he's doing the, giving his guys little commands. At certain points when he's like really winning, he starts like giving them little hugs over the back of the shoulder. Yeah, it's
oh my gosh.
Yeah, you figure he's got like a bunch of like, I don't know, Visa gift cards he's gonna hand out to everybody if this goes well. He's so excited. He
orders pizza for the office.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special Superman bonus episode of the Overly Sarcastic podcast. I am Blue, and I'm joined by Red.
Hello, I am the second important color on Superman's uniform, and that is why I am also here.
But we are also joined by not two other colors on Superman's uniform, but two very special guests, Nando v. Movies and Case Aiken. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Woohoo!
Thank you so much for having us. I'm very, very excited to talk about this movie. That I've had it like weeks now to like think about, and I feel like I've gotten new feelings on. So first time talking about it in a couple of days. This will be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here as well. I managed to see the movie twice before opening night, and then did a very long podcast about it. But I've had the chance to see it a third time in theaters and a half time not in theaters since then, and so I have even more thoughts.
The implications. I don't even know like what mechanically that looks like.
Yeah, fascinating.
But before we get into our thoughts on this movie that we have all seen and very much enjoyed, could you both briefly introduce yourselves and your relation and your interest, your on-ramp to Superman?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go for it. My name is Nando. I make videos about movies, comic book movies, usually because that is the dominant force in popular culture and what was very popular when I was young in the 90s. So Superman was a part of that. The Superman animated series was like if it gets like forgotten about, I feel like, because the X-Men, like what is now X-Men 97, but like that series and then Batman the Animated Series were so dominant. But like that Superman show is pretty good too. And obviously that, turns into Justice League with that whole universe kind of syncing up. So I feel like mostly that's how I kind of got interested in Superman as a kid, because I'd not ever seen those older movies. But as time has gone on, I've started reading a lot more Superman comics, a lot of the classics, a lot of the current-ish runs. I'm not fully caught up, and I did make a video I don't even remember when this was, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. It was my pitch for a second Man of Steel movie that kind of is my pitch for what this movie kind of could have been. So that's been the most I've been thinking. And I did a fan casting of Superman, although I did not pick the one that James ended up picking, but we were going for different things. So yeah, that's my kind of Superman credentials in relation to this movie specifically.
Nice.
Amazing.
Yeah, and as for me, I mean, I could just say I have a Superman podcast and leave it at that, because that sort of should sum up at least the level of fervor that I experience in the current day-to-day with Superman. I'm thinking about him at least bi-weekly, if not more.
Your Roman Empire.
Yes, exactly. But I've always been attracted to the Superman archetype. Like I grew up on like Super Grover and like Mighty Mouse as like things that were just like in my cultural sphere before I was even able to read. And as soon as I got into reading, period, I got into comic books, and that archetype was abundant, and I was attracted to it. And then I saw Superman 3, and I was terrified of Superman for a really long time because of the robot scene.
Hell yeah,
you all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely.
I stopped at 2 in the Donner cut, so I actually don't know what we're talking about.
Oh man, like Superman 3 is not really a Superman movie; it's a Richard Pryor movie. But but there is a scene where someone gets assimilated into being a robot, and it is nightmare fuel for millennials.
Ooh, fun!
Yeah.
But I remained a Superman fan, and always have sort of fueled my like interest in comic books as a whole through the lens of seeing things as like archetypal natures of things. You know, the same way, Red, you have like trope tops, like talking about elements of story and so forth. Seeing the heritage, seeing the lineage of a character and how it connects to Superman, who is the progenitor of the medium that I have like really spent a huge amount of both mental energy and money on, has always been a big part of me. And I have fought to keep that as like a big part of my life going forward, which is kind of why I have a Superman podcast.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. All right, well, let's not dally any longer. We've got this big new movie to talk about. I'll start us off with perhaps the broadest take, which is the thing that I really loved about seeing this movie. I went to go see it with my wife and my dad. He was in town. It ended up working out quite nicely. Was just the tone of this movie and the focus on goodness is like the most obvious take of like, what's good about it? Oh, it's like Superman gets to be nice. What a world. Like, good. Imagine. But it really did strike me so much, and it's what I loved about it the most, and letting the character of this version of Superman portrayed by David Corenswet shine through so much. And specifically in one detail, it's the trunks. They made the trunks work, and it just Nando, you had a video a long time ago of like to trunks or not to trunks, and it completely rewired my brain for this. And seeing this version of Superman that David Corenswet was so specifically like, even if it looks silly, we have to do the trunks because Superman is okay with looking silly because it makes him approachable to the kids, to the people of Metropolis. It's like, yes, that's it exactly. And that was just absolutely the thing that grabbed me and brought me into this world and this portrayal of like, this is a Superman who is nice, who cares, who just has this warmth and goodness to him so much that I've kind of seen in various, interpretations in the Justice League. He's Superman, but he doesn't really get to do that kind of thing as much in the old cartoons. But this was just such a thrill and a joy for me. And I could mention other things, but that's like the biggest aspect in my brain that will stick with me forever is the way they presented this Superman as a character, as an archetype.
The thing about the costume,
he saves the squirrel.
He saves the squirrel. Yeah, we love he saved the squirrel. The thing with the costume that I thought was interesting, I've seen a little bit from, I think it's possibly a remake of Superman Smashes the Klan, where he's like talking to this like circus strongman, and the guy's like, "Oh man, you're so strong and cool. Have you ever like thought of performing?" And Superman's like, well, Clark is like, "No, I don't want to scare people. I've got all these abilities." And the strongman, who's this like giant bald man, very like imposing, is like, "I had the exact same problem, and you know what I did about it? A costume. The more colorful, the better. Because if people can like smile at your presence, they're not going to be terrified of how powerful you are." And I was like, that is exactly correct, and I love it a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the trunks is a really good litmus test of like how much is this movie okay with being goofy. And I've been like banging this drum for years that the thing that's been frustrating me about recent superhero movies is how much they all feel like the superhero comics are a thing they need to correct for. This is where we're getting the characters from, but everything else is the extremely embarrassing middle school yearbook photo that we're just going to crop this out of and get out of the way. Whereas it's like, oh, it turns out it actually is that easy to hit the tonal bullseye of what a superhero comic feels like, in terms of how colorful it is and how many random cameos you can expect to get from other characters in the same universe, and the choreography of the fights and the vibe and the banter. My current like comic touch point is I've been keeping up with the current World's Finest run, which cool. was illustrated by Dan Mora until quite recently, but I also like the new guy. And of course, it's just like, hey, forget the current timeline. This is just Superman and Batman and Dick Grayson as Robin, and they're hanging out in the golden age of comics, just having a grand old time. And the only thing we've done to upgrade the costumes is we've put some piping on them so that they look slightly less blocky on the page. That's the only change. And it's very hokey in a very fun way, but it's got all these like really powerful character moments in it. And it's like, yeah, it really is that easy. Watching this movie made it feel like making a Superman movie should be easy. Because look at this one. I also have specific details that I liked, but it probably is mostly the squirrel. And honestly, I love how they integrated Krypto into this movie. Sometimes when a character-driven writer is like writing a story, you can tell when a character sort of hijacks the script and is like, this is my show now. And I love that clearly happened with the dog.
Krypto grabs the script, just bites it.
It's like, we had a plan, And then Crypto had other ideas in every scene, and we just kind of had to deal with that. So I really liked that, and I liked how willing they were to let everything be kind of doofy.
Yeah.
So
how did you guys like the tone of the movie and this portrayal of Superman to kind of keep us in this realm of my one note is like I liked the tone, but how did you guys react to it?
I mean, tonally, I think it was fun. I liked that tonally. I guess I liked that. And I think you said something kind of like this, Red. Like the movie gave, I think, the audience enough credit when it came to like throwing concepts and weird stuff out there. I think like there were certain points where I'm like, I'm glad I know who all these guys are, because I bet if I didn't know who any of them were, this would be kind of weird. But I think overall they just kind of went, you're gonna get who this guy is. He's gonna walk in and say his name and then go do his thing basically. And I think it's interesting looking back how many of the characters they used, that like looking at like specific characters, which I'm sure we'll get to, but like some of the other heroes are like not the easiest heroes to adapt in anything, and give an audience a good sense for. But I think because because tonally and like kind of it's like, I guess a pacing thing, but the movie moves at such a clip and is constantly doing things that I think it forces the audience to just kind of go with it and like not even suspend disbelief, but just go like, I'll figure out who these guys are eventually if I don't know what this thing is, and like if I don't know where this kaiju came from, it's probably not important, so I'll just let them explain it to me later. So I like that aspect of it a lot, that it was just a big, and I remember seeing James talk about this seeing like an interview or something. I forget what explanation he used, but it was asked kind of like, you're introducing all these new characters. Is that something you can like do? It's so many new, besides Superman and Lois Lane, it's like Mr. Terrific and everybody. And this isn't the example he used, but it's like, yeah, well, Saving Private Ryan has a lot of characters too, but you just kind of expect that you're going to know who they are by the end of the movie. And I think that attitude being kind of extrapolated to all of this, was maybe my favorite part of this new movie.
I had two really quick thoughts on that because I don't want to cut in line, but I didn't want the conversation to get away. One of them was that I really like how this movie does not presume it is your first Superman movie. They're like, especially because it's so clearly building off of the Reeve movies, just aesthetically and the costume and the vibe. In some of his like civilian outfits, I was like, that's from the Reeve movies. That's why they're doing that. And the second thing is my favorite writing life hack that I've been running into recently is that like, in a lot of cases, you can just skip to the good stuff. You can skip the boring setup. You can skip the encyclopedic, the text crawl. You can just drop people in medias res, and they will mostly be able to catch up and piece together the important parts. And like, if you're writing and you're like, oh, this part's kind of a slog, but I gotta set up the next part, it's like, consider just skipping it. Consider just like, now we're doing this.
It's not only not an origin story, it's right in the middle of it, which just rules.
We've just skipped over a completely typical Superman adventure that we get as a noodle incident being discussed in an interview that goes off the rails. It's like, I could absolutely see Superman going like, I'll stop this war, smash up some tanks, grab the bad guy out of the Oval Office and be like, hey now, knock that off, mister, or you'll be answering to me, and then flying back off to the good old US of A. We don't need to see it. We know how it went.
Well, it's perfect that you mentioned the sort of in media res thing, because it was making me think of my abridged MCU order. So like I have this order for the phase 1 through 3 that if anyone just like wants to get the gist of it, they watch Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. And like as long as you allow for the scenario that new superheroes are going to show up and that the movie will do enough of a job of explaining who they are, you're gonna be fine. Like Guardians does the job of explaining like the big space stuff, and then like Civil War, you're like, oh well, okay, there's been some tension, there's been some roster changes, but like that's fine, we can just move on, and then you can kind of just go about your business and sort of work with that. Like it felt very much like an episode of JLU or Justice League Unlimited, but it also just felt very much like you picked up an issue of a comic book, and it's the next arc. Like it's serialized storytelling, and in this scenario, I mean, in that regard, it makes me think a lot of the radio show, which was a serialized story where every arc you would end the arc with the handoff to the next arc.
Of course.
And so, like for example, when I did an episode on my show about not the first, but the first one that we actually still have of the Batman Superman crossovers that they did on the radio show, we had to watch the last part of the previous story, which was a completely batshit insane scenario about like literal dwarves. Yeah, and then it's like, and then the next one is like the handoff to the Batman Superman like crossover story. And so in this scenario, we're looking at a movie where just it happened. Like, already a big thing happened, and now we're going to hand off and move on to the next story.
Powerful thing in stories,
Yeah.
but
Well,
Red,
yeah.
what?
I was
I'll
gonna
let
say,
you do the handoff.
thank you. Speaking of handoff, Red, why don't you give us your top line Superman thoughts, and we'll see where that conversation goes.
Oh, yeah. I think that the thing I keep coming back to with the movie is that feeling of like, oh, you can just do that? Because obviously this movie cannot avoid being compared to the past, like, decade, more than a decade, like decade and a half of superhero movie zeitgeist, where it was basically all origin story. Like one origin story, another origin story, another origin story, and then they build up to the big crossover special. And then we need to status quo things by breaking up the band, perhaps, and then trashing the sets so nobody gets any ideas about sequels or whatever. And it's, I mean, I've made my complaints about that pretty clear on multiple occasions, because the thing that is most fun in a typical superhero universe is the weird episodic adventures within the status quo, which is why I'm enjoying World's Finest so much, because it is truly like we're taking a chunk of time and we're just putting more adventures in it. Who cares? They're fighting interdimensional imps again. There's a big red guy, and he sure is angry. So, and it's just like, that's the fun part. Like, obviously, you play with the status quo. There's usually stuff going on in the background. Someone's undergoing an arc. Someone's temporarily dead. Someone's had a costume change. But mostly, it's about, like, the weird stuff you throw at these characters, and then you see how they respond. One of the things we noticed about this movie is that Superman doesn't have much of a character arc. He basically has like a brief dip into like, oh, my bio parents are maybe bad actually, but then kind of loops back to, oh, but I guess being Superman was my idea in the first place, so this is actually okay. And instead it's just his presence in the story that kind of inspires arcs in everybody else, which is, I think, A, how to write a good Paragon, and B, how to write a really good Superman movie, because the idea is that he's kind of this fixed point, and then you just throw situations at him and try to like, see how he navigates them, because all these powers does not make every problem an easy fix for him to solve. So, there's still challenges, especially when it comes to avoiding collateral damage, which, Blue, you made a whole video about that. So I don't know. It's really interesting how they managed to actually capture the vibe of a superhero comic in a way that a lot of movies just haven't done. And I think it's because they haven't wanted to. Because the idea is like you pull the character out of the comic, and then you can avoid all that complication and the homework and the confusion, and then you can just put them on the big screen and lovingly render them in 3D, and everyone can admire how cool they look. And how serious we're taking their story is another thing. Spoiler alert, we have a video in the works about this, and in the process of cutting it together, I saw more of Man of Steel than I have ever watched before. And it is just saturated in how much comic book can we squeeze out of this comic book movie so nobody thinks we're nerds. And it's just, like the insecurity on full display. It's just really embarrassing to watch when compared to like the sort of like profoundly colorful sincerity that we got in this angle on it. But yeah, no, movie good, I guess. I keep finding new ways to say that, but I had a good time, so.
Great. Well, why don't we jump into one of our guests? Case, do you want to give us your thoughts on Superman the movie? Not Superman the movie, Superman 2025?
Superman 2025.
Yeah, Superman 2025.
Italicized.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that this is a wonderful distillation of a lot of Superman, but especially surprisingly the Triangle era Superman. I was really taken aback by like how much he felt like a character that existed in this much more like conscious of continuity and crossovers kind of world. And the fact that we get Ma and Pa Kent both being alive is nice, and the fact that which has become like impossible to do up until this point in like movie versions of Superman, but has been very much the status quo in most of the comics versions of Superman.
They can't stop killing Jonathan for like the Superman Clark's last kick in the butt to get him out of Kansas. It's got to be Jonathan kicking the bucket. So I I really like the Kents in this movie. They were so sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do a fantastic job of having a character that feels like he has realistic limitations without necessarily being limited, like not having like a power down situation. Like I saw a really good breakdown of just how many points he has his powers stripped of him and how he is constantly in the healing process for this all. And it was like, oh, that's a really good way of keeping Superman an engaging character. Like the only fight that we really see where he's theoretically at full power is the kaiju fight, which the majority of the fight is about keeping collateral damage out of play. And so it's really effective at having stakes for Superman of all varieties, of the ones where it is about the collateral damage, about keeping civilians safe, about keeping squirrels goddamn safe. But then at the same time, we do allow for scenarios of like, okay, he fought Ultraman and he is not back at full power by the time he goes in for round 2 with him, or the Hammer of Baravia, or whatever you want to say. And then later on, because of the being imprisoned in a place with no sun and being exposed to kryptonite and only getting like a little bit of a power boost from that very cool like solar reaction that Metamorpho does. Like we will have to spend some time talking about the supporting characters and how well they're implemented here.
Weird version of Metamorpho.
Like he never fully heals. Like he has to go back to action. They say it's going to take at least 2 days for him to heal. The next day he's back in action. So at every point he is being tested in ways that are burdensome to a Superman, and like that is really it's a razor edge to walk between depowering the character and having engaging struggles for him. And I think they do a really good job here.
Especially with Superman specifically, because for reasons only loosely related to having watched the movie, I spent the last couple days just watching a bunch of Smallville, and every episode is like, oh no, Clark, there's kryptonite in this snow globe kind of shit. And it's like, it's very funny, and it is a good way to make it so that things are difficult for him, but it is always kryptonite. Every single time it's meteor rocks. And I like how in this movie, step 1, they were like, there's no more kryptonite on Earth. Lex has it to improvise. Metamorpho is now being held hostage to make kryptonite, and then also no sunlight, and then also nanites and shit. So like, they keep finding new ways to realistically challenge him that aren't just, oh, bad news, we found more green rocks. So I thought that was cool. I thought that was cool and creative.
Yeah. I do appreciate that the engineer has the exact same power set as Bloodshot from the movie Bloodshot, which is a thing that appealed only to me in the theater that I was in. But yes!
That's true.
Her blood is nanites, which is also Bloodshot's business. So the crossover possibility is endless.
She's at this point, she's all nanites. I like that little bit where she just does a handstand for no reason, then rebuilds her head out of her legs. I was like,
I was
why?
thinking about that scene specifically when I was rewatching the movie yesterday, because like the engineer, I mean. For one, we should shout out the fact that this is the first time a Wildstorm character has made it onto a movie, which is really cool. But like the engineer was the Green Lantern analog in the Authority. Like her shtick was that she creates all kinds of props, but like prop weapons and so forth at will. But the thing is, the Authority never quite did a good enough job of conveying the body horror aspect of replacing all your blood with nanotechnology. Like Warren Ellis does a great job describing it and making it sound really cool, but like to show off like just how reconfigurable her body is, they needed a scene like that because the character is impressively powerful, and they needed to show that like in addition to being able to make spinning discs, which I don't know why that was the sort of the de jure weapon for her.
They had one Blender model. They really wanted to get their money's worth.
But they needed to show off just like how flexible the character was, because like in the comics, like, you know, push up my glasses right now, like she makes like copies of herself. She is able to do like all kinds of like crazy Green Lantern-esque tricks, and so we needed something like that.
I appreciated how much it felt like, because I consider myself reasonably aware of comics characters, but I was always more of an X-Men gal than Superman. So, you know, going into this, I was like, there's going to be guys who I do not know in this movie, and I hope that I understand how they can be used. And the engineer in particular, as she showed up, I was like, I got no idea what this person's deal is. And then quickly I learned it's Bloodshot from the movie Bloodshot. But still, I appreciated how, like, immediately visually the movie communicated, like, this is this person's shtick. This is as much as you need to know. It kind of gets back to that conversation we were having earlier about living in a world and letting someone show up without it being their origin story. Like, I appreciated this movie did a good job, I felt, of making characters comprehensible to someone who might just be, like, sparing them a glance before turning to look back at beautiful David Corenswet Philly has
Below.
Superman now. Move over Smallville. He's ours. Someone get that boy a
Yeah.
cheesesteak and a Hertz jersey, and let's do this right.
I did think it was interesting how, like, you know, we've gotten very used to in superhero movies someone being like, oh, that name they just dropped of that background character is actually an obscure superhero from the 1980s or whatever. It's like, oh, that's kind of neat. Do you think we're ever going to get to see him? And to the point where, like, it actually produced almost like plot holes in earlier MCU movies where it's like, Stephen Strange is being targeted by Project Insight.
Yeah.
He
Right.
is for sure just a doctor right now. Are you telling me Project Insight knows about wizards? So, like, can predict that he will be a wizard? But it's just like, oh, if we're just doing a bunch of, you know, names, it's like, yeah, Bruce Banner, Stephen Strange. Sure, we can drop those in the same sentence. Those are both characters we have the rights to. So I kind of like that in this one. If a character was named, it was probably because they were just like a canon superhero or Lois Lane in the cast of the Daily Planet and all that. I also have to shout out, I only know the Daily Planet guys because we watch My Adventures with Superman and they are all name dropped there. So that's the only reason
yes.
I was like, ah, yes, Cat Grant. I know you from Supergirl and My Adventures with Superman. Anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, I thought it was good because it felt like they weren't playing coy or sort of like dangling the carrot on the string, you know, like, oh, give us another 7 movies and maybe you'll get to see this guy, perhaps recast or with a completely different backstory. And then it was just like, here's Guy Gardner. You're all welcome.
Yeah, I feel like, and when we were talking about like the idea of introducing like a lot of ideas and starting in the middle, I do feel like that also felt very comic-y, specifically in the way that like every time you read like an issue 4 of like an ongoing series, even though you're reading the 4th issue, every character has to still go, but you're Superman. You came here from Krypton as a child, and now you got powers, and you're this. And like they do that in here, like when he goes to the thing for the first time, the robot's like, he loves hearing his backstory in the computer. Let's listen to the backstory. And like even
It's
like
so
when they
insane.
introduce Metamorpho, Lex Luthor is like, he can metamorphose anything you want. It's pretty crazy. And like it feels like that kind of that bit they do in the Into the Spider-Verse sequel where they have Ben Reilly kind of analyze every single thing he's doing. But like I do feel like it reminds me of comics, where every time a comic starts, they just assume you've never read any of these comics before and give you like a very short introduction to every character in the first couple of pages, so that you're up to speed. So like I think putting that into a movie was more or less was pretty smart.
Yeah,
The
it's like
funny
the
thing
ghost of Jim Shooter haunts this movie. Like Jim Shooter, when in the '80s, like made it like a hard rule of like it like at Marvel Comics, this could be anyone's first issue. So you have to like every page you have to like use their character name, and you have to like at some point give an explanation of who they are.
Yeah, that's why Rogue's always telling people, you know, her first boyfriend died because she, you know, tapped him on the shoulder or whatever.
I can't touch him or he'll explode.
He'll explode,
My most heretical comic approach is that if I'm checking out a new series, I will start with issue 4. I will skip over. I'll just or like if it's like 200 issues, I'll pick a random one in the middle and just see what they're doing. And it's very rewarding, especially in superhero comics, because I'm firmly of the opinion that starting a story is the hardest part, which is why it has been so frustrating to see like so many false starts to superhero franchise movies where they're like, we got to do the intro. What if nobody knows who Ben Grimm is? And then we get like the origin and then maybe a sequel and then maybe a second sequel, which will probably be worse, you know, like X-Men movie style kind of thing. So you basically will end up with one adventure that is in the status quo of what you might expect from this team. If you're lucky, sometimes you get no adventures because the adventure you get is the team assembling for half of it. I could be talking about anything right now. Don't even worry about it. But like, the comic status quo, the stuff that you get from the middle with no context in medias res in a superhero comic is sometimes the most comfortable place to be because you're not bogged down by all these weird tangents and like the entire other run of a different comic you needed to read for context of this crossover event that we just skipped over. Like if you can avoid those, it's peak. And I kind of like that this movie feels like you've clicked in 20 minutes into like a series, like an episode or like a season of a Superman show. And it's like, at last time on Superman, we stopped a war. This time, consequences.
I was just gonna say, it's crazy about how I saw the movie because we I was coming in from the city that day, doing like stuff, and I knew I was gonna be a little late, and because the trains are bad, I was like about 2 minutes late to this movie, but I thought I was 15 minutes late because I was like, oh, there must have been like a big fight with that Barovia guy where he did all that stuff that they said he did to the set or to the prime minister or whatever. It's a bummer I missed it. I guess I'll have to check it out the next time. And then I went to watch another time. It's like, no, they just don't do it, and like they tell you about it, but
That's the thing.
you know, and that's
sometimes less is more. Because I got my parents had a bunch of comics, but it was like, oh, this is like issue 17 of a manga, so I'll be like, oh, read this, and like a character will be like, here's my tragic backstory, and I'm like, wow, that sounds really cool and vague, and then when I read it all in order, I'm like, oh, we saw that happen 5 issues ago. We just saw that all play out on screen, and then she told us about it later. Okay. Less cool than the version I had in my head where I had to like sort of piece it together from the environmental storytelling and the dawning horror of, how did you get those scars kind of thing. And I don't know. I think that writers are terrified of not being understood and thus typically will over-explain to compensate, especially in something as weirdly convoluted as a superhero story where like there's a very real chance that you won't understand what's going on because it actually is nonsensical. And sometimes it's just like you can trust that your audience knows who Superman is and that he can take a punch and he's okay. So here he is. He's in a crater now. Let's talk.
Yeah. Well, let's get thoughts from our second guest, Nando. How did you feel about the superhero movie? The Superman movie. I mean, it is a superhero movie, technically.
Yeah. That's what like... I figure, like my grandma would call it or something. She's like, you want to see the superhero movie? Oh, yeah,
you want to see
you're gonna have to be more specific. But yeah.
Did you get the superhero on your Game Boy?
I'll say I pretty much agree with everything everybody said so far. But I will say one other thing about this that I feel like is a core to the movie, and I do think is fun because we've used the word "they" to describe like. They don't have kryptonite, so they do this, and like we're talking about James Gunn and the previous movie. But as a creature of the internet, someone who grew up over this time, I can really appreciate like good hate, like a real strong amount of like, just seething rage, envy specifically. And I love that this version of Lex is just like the 100% certified hater who is driving this movie so that every time it gets kind of boring or like could get kind of boring, he's like, oh, I have a new guy. Here's this thing and this is a different thing that I'm going to do.
For this contingency.
Yeah, and I feel like in movies, we've seen a lot of movies. Specifically, I feel like in that Dark Knight era, which movies that I think are mostly good, right? Dark Knight is one, although not exactly as much, but then like Avengers 1 and Skyfall, where the bad guy had a plan that was so weird and you were like, this doesn't, if you take one part of this plan away, it all falls apart. But like, I guess you expected that he would be at the courthouse that day or whatever. But this is one of the only times where I feel like I've seen a plan that complicated, and it's just like, no, because he really has like 15 other things that he's waiting to do. Like you could, I always imagine, and I know they put this in like the I think there's like some supplementary book or something that got released before the movie came out, or I don't know if it was a comic, but it involved a story with Metallo that is not canon to the movie, but like kind of could be. But in my head, Metallo is just he's practicing his swing for the time he's going to beat up Superman. He's just waiting for the call because he's the next guy. Yeah. But Lex never needs him, so he doesn't bother with Metallo. And like
he just sees Lex getting arrested on TV. Like,
yeah.
All right, I guess my week's opened up.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I like that Lex just has that. I love this version of Lex. I'm
so good.
I was about to say I'm a Kevin Spacey apologist, but I think that version of Lex is good. I like that version of Lex because he also is filled with hate and like really, really, really hates Superman. But I don't think he felt like a new character. And obviously Gene Hackman's fun and Clancy Brown's the best. But besides Clancy Brown, like this is the closest I feel like we've seen to like a full, Lex performance where he was just everything I want from him. And I love Nicholas Hoult. I love the Great. I love, I liked him as Beast in those movies, even though they kind of forgot what to do with him. And like The Menu. And he's really good, especially recently, at playing like a shitty guy who sucks.
Yep.
And I appreciate that, that he brought such a crazy energy to Luthor. And I still think it's so insane that he auditioned for Superman. And like, I cannot imagine that version of the movie now. But,
I'm so glad.
It's essential.
I'm so glad you brought this up because this is the stealth thesis of the entire detailed diatribe I did about this movie. Because like everything else that's good about this movie is like, yeah, he's a really good version of Superman. Yeah, he's a solid paragon. He saves a lot of lives. It's not an empty world. There's no like nihilistic dismissal of the value of a life. Superman can just be a firefighter. But Lex Luthor, he's new. Because like I was comparing him to all these other supervillains, and specifically Lex. They always feel the need to give him a reason for what he's doing, where getting Superman out of the way is just like step one. And like the Christopher Reeve Superman movies that, of course, these movies are very much in conversation with, Gene Hackman's Luthor is a bit of a clown. Like, he's on paper smart, but in practice, he's an absolute goober. And, like, all of his plans go wrong entirely because of his own, hubris and such. And the whole thing is just like, I need to kill Superman because he's stopping my earthquake machine from knocking California into the ocean. And that means my stupid real estate gambit isn't going to work. So, like, killing Superman is just, like, step one. And then in the second movie, it's like, well, Zod is the problem, and Luthor is happy when Superman shows up to deal with him because he doesn't know how to handle Zod. So just the idea that Lex Luthor can just be entirely internally motivated of like, no, Superman being dead is the only thing I want. I don't actually, all this other stuff is icing. I really hate that guy and I want him dead. Like, you get a little bit of that in the cartoon version. Like we said, Clancy Brown is sort of a superlative version. And a lot of that is just because like he has schemes, but most of it is truly just like, how can I piss off Superman this week? Like I guess the beta version of the reveal of this movie, which is I orchestrated this entire war so I would have an excuse to kill you, is in the cartoon when he runs for president and his big reveal to the question is like, that's right, detective, I did this entirely to piss Superman off. Like, I don't give a shit about being do you know how much power I'd have to give up to be president? Still one of his best lines.
The best.
And like they always add weird layers to Lex. They always change him up. They always give him something else going on, at least at first. Like, he can develop a boiling hatred for Superman after his plans are thwarted. But initially, they're like, no, there has to be a reason. And then, of course, in Smallville, they spend like multiple seasons with Lex being like, man, Clark, I just love how good of friends we are and how awesome, how truly we will be friends forever and nothing will ever spoil this amazing bromance we've got going. And Clark is like, yep, sure thing, buddy. No secrets here.
The thing with Luthor that struck me the most, and I almost went with this at the beginning, but I'm glad you brought it up, Nando, is the way that Lex not only has like concocted this huge ridiculous plan, but knows the details so intimately he can call out the moves with his like little fucking MLG speed run game pit with all these people where he knows every single setup. He's rehearsed this shit in the shower for months. He knows every single move to call out and exactly what to do. That is someone who is obsessed, who is going for the Nobel Hate Prize.
And I love the detail of when he's having the argument with Superman, he's still writing the numbers and things down on a pad and showing them to people because he can even do it as like a secondary thing because he's have to, obviously he's like, well, there's probably going to be a point where I'm yelling at him and I have to still be able to put the codes in, so I'll just carry a pen. And I love that about him.
I absolutely
that
believe
gets
that
back to the benefit of it being in media res. Like, we're able to start with him already having accrued this hatred. Like, even though in the movie, supposedly, this is their first encounter with each other face to face, like, clearly Superman has interfered in his plans. And this is a Lex who, like, as we said, it's like he's setting up a Xanatos gambit. Like, he is doing as many possible chess pieces. Chess is probably the wrong thing. Many possible risk pieces, getting them all into the right position to strike and take out all your armies simultaneously. He's got it going, and it's only that he overplays his hand at the very end.
I do think that the one interesting distinction between this version of Lex Luthor and, of course, David Xanatos, my beloved, the archetypical Magnificent Bastard, is that Xanatos knows it's possible for him to lose, so he makes contingencies for in case he loses so that he still wins. Whereas this version of Luthor, on some level, is high enough on his own supply that he's like, look, I can have a setback, but ultimately I am the smartest and the coolest and the best, and therefore I will win by default. And you can really tell, like, they let him take L's in this movie and be so mad about it. Because, when Superman gets broken out of, illegal extra-dimensional jail, I was expecting Luthor to be like, not to worry, I prepared for this contingency. Instead, he has a screaming breakdown and starts knocking shit over like an angry cat. And I was like, oh, we're starting the breakdown early.
The pick that up was so goddamn
funny. Fucking dismissive.
Keeps knocking shit on the ground.
But I really...
That is great how emotional he's getting too, because the other bit that I love on the other side of that is when he's in the first fight with the Hammer of Baravia, where he's doing the, giving his guys little commands. At certain points when he's like really winning, he starts like giving them little hugs over the back of the shoulder.
It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, you figure he's got like a bunch of like, I don't know, Visa gift cards he's going to hand out to everybody if this goes well. Because he's so excited. He
orders
can't,
pizza for the
get
office.
over it. Yeah.
Well, it's fun like that he has his like little sycophants that like
Yes.
adore him and like you know it. It's kind of like those Elon Bros.
Yeah. They've got a whole slide in
Insane
the
that
detailed
Gunn was able to
diatribe.
write something so like unintentionally prescient.
Well, you know, people like that have always
unintentionally
existed.
is maybe a word we're prescribing to it, but yeah, it's impressive that they managed to make him they demonstrate that he is an incredibly intelligent supervillain, right? Like he can come up with infinite schemes and plans on how to specifically take down Superman, but that does not necessarily make him right. And I think there's this trend in like kind of like the Dark Knight era of superhero movies proceeding into like your Men of Steels and whatnot, of like our villains, even if they're not necessarily explicitly geniuses, have like an important commentary on the world that they're going to bring to us.
Yep.
And Lex Luthor truly is just straight up a hater of Superman in this movie. His worldview is not justified. It is a bad thing. And the thing that makes him smart and the thing that makes him demonstrably a problem is that he's really clever when it comes to coming up with ways to thwart Superman. And that makes him a good villain and a good foil to a character who is about hope and making a better world by doing, you know, acts of kindness and support. So it's a good
Punk rock.
good balance. Punk rock.
I think that one element of why I like this version of Lex so much is that his character is unapologetically about Superman. Like you said, like they don't like assign him a philosophical stance and be like, but have you ever thought that maybe he's right a little bit actually? Like, no, this guy's just actually the worst. He's just a slimy little hater who cannot stand the fact that the world's attention has now gone to some other guy who's making it look easy. And he's so interestingly hateable because he is truly just entirely caught up in himself, but in such a way that his character is 1000% motivated exclusively by Superman. So the movie ends up being about Superman, whereas a lot of superhero movies have not been about their lead. They've been about something else. They've been about whatever the villain's going on about or whatever, or they've been about, because usually the hero is a very reactive force in their own movie. You know, they exist because there are nebulous threats, but they exist in this movie because there's a specific threat, and the specific threat is the villain, and that means whatever the villain is on about is going to be what the movie turns out to be about. And I like that in this one, it just points it right back at Clark and is like, Superman, it's about Superman. His name is on the poster. He's on the poster. He's got top billing. Lex Luthor's only in here to make Superman look better, and nobody's madder about that than Lex Luthor. And that's how it should be, you know?
And
Yeah,
it makes
this
me
kinda-
so excited. I was just
please.
gonna say, it makes me so excited for a future movie when
Yes.
something else
Yeah.
happens. Like when
Yeah.
I'm just gonna like Brainiac shows up or whatever, and he's like, "I'm here to kill Superman," and he
Ooh.
destroys Coast City or whatever. And Lex is just in his prison cell, like, "You guys, see? Do you see now what I was right about all of this?" Because that's gonna be a real fun moment.
I'm excited
Yeah.
for this Luthor to somehow get even worse. Because, like, he was dangerous when he was proud. He's going to be so much more dangerous now that he's been humiliated on a global stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a good, Red, I think, jumping off point for, I'm going to do my very brief thoughts on the movie, and then we've got a couple Q&A questions related to Superman. So one explicitly says the word Superman, others are tangential but related. But yeah, I overall agree, like this movie a lot. But Red, I think that your point, that the movie is about Superman, right? That it centers him and it feels like it's distinctly his movie is a testament to something that I've always appreciated about James Gunn's writing, is I think he's a very good adapter of different pieces of media because he kind of gets to the core of what that thing is really well. And I was a bit nervous going into this movie because I'm like, well, a lot of James Gunn's work post-Guardians has been very similar to each other. Ragtag group of weirdos. They're going to quip a lot. There's like way too many needle drops per capita at this point. I hope that Superman manages to still feel like it's a distinctly Superman movie and not like it's James Gunn does Superman. And I don't know that it completely escapes that. There were definitely a couple clips where I'm like, that is James Gunn's writing punching its way through the screen to hit Indigo in the face in the theater and say, "Why are you talking about the harem so much?" But overall, I think he did a really good job of towing that balance of being like, what makes Superman a distinctive character in this movie, and why is this a Superman movie and not a superhero movie? And it's that centering of Hope and the Superman character as this good Kansas boy who chooses to be a hero, and that is his arc of reaffirming that choice throughout. And I really appreciated that. And I have to commend his restraint in only really putting in one significant needle drop because, dear God, we were so close so many times.
We had to give Mr. Terrific his little Yondu moment.
And it was
awesome.
Yeah.
It was good. But
I
yeah,
think in an
overall,
interview, James Gunn said that he had written more, but like toned it down afterwards. He was
have
like,
to.
"No, we have a score. It
Yep.
was written custom for this.
you
I
have
have to
one
use
of
it."
the best John Williams scores of all
Yeah.
time being homaged and iconically used. You
Yeah.
can't put 10,000 indie songs from the 90s in there. It's just not sustainable.
No, it's shocking how few songs are on the soundtrack. Like it's
Yeah.
4 songs that are credited in the credits, and 2 of them are the actual credits music.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the Mighty
Yes.
Crabjoys one they made special because they're a made-up band. I didn't know
Yes.
that.
Neither
All
did
the
I,
respect in
yeah.
the world for the custom credits song. That is a move that is classy. Okay, that's
Yeah.
a move movies need to bring back. But yeah, no, it's restrained, and it does feel like this movie is like, okay, we get it, we get what Superman's deal is and why it's his movie and not anyone else's show. And at the end of the day, I appreciated that. Again, I'm not like the biggest Superman person in the world. I like the character, but it's not one I seek out a lot. And I found myself really appreciating the character more from this viewing experience, which I think is the most you can ask from
Yeah.
a Superman movie.
Working as intended.
Not
working
immune
as
to propaganda.
Yeah. But on that note, we do have some Q&A questions to get to. So why don't I kick this off for us? We've got one here from Flo. What Superman comic or comic series would you recommend? So let's get some Superman comic recommendations. We've got a few comic experts on this call. What's some good Superman people should be reading if they enjoyed the movie?
I already mentioned World's Finest, Superman Batman World's Finest, the one that's currently going.
I'm going to throw a weird one out there, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Superman's Secret Identity by Kurt
Yes!
Busiek.
Oh,
and
that
Stuart
one is
Immonen.
weird.
It is. It's weird because the pitch for it is what if Superman in the real world.
Yes.
But it is just as hopeful. It is just as heartwarming. It is the life of a Superman existing in a world kind of by himself. By the end, it's not entirely by himself, but for the majority, it is a person living a secret life as Superman, and it is just a fantastic story.
Yeah. No, I second that. You can't put it in the same canon as any other Superman story because it's not. It's real man in real life who develops Superman powers and has to navigate that. But it is so good, and it's such an interesting angle. So, seconded. Superman versus the Elite is fun, but I think that's just one issue of a much longer running, like one of those 400 issue long runs of Superman.
Yeah, I want to say, I can't remember what number it is, but it is all that one. What is it? What's so funny about
What's so funny about
Justice
Yeah,
American?
so like,
yeah.
it's digestible if somebody wants to
Yeah.
go and read that. I think like
Just
I don't
watch
know
the
if
movie instead.
Yeah, the
George
movie's
Newbern
good.
going
and,
full
like,
Sephiroth on it. It's really fun.
Yeah, it's tough to like recommend a single because I feel like we named a couple, and like obviously there's the ones that James Gunn loves to name drop that like are part of this movie's DNA.
All-Star
I was-
Superman?
Yeah.
All-Star
Okay, yeah.
Superman. What's the other one that I feel like came up a lot? I cannot remember, but I would say like the Superman book that I've started reading this week, and this is just because I think I might do a video on it, but it was a recent run that I didn't know too much about, but I remember seeing like the images from it, and specifically like some of the toys, being like, oh, it looks kind of fun. But then as I've read it, I'm like, oh, this is like a really interesting. This is Superman in a setting that I think kind of plays to his strengths. But it's the when was this? 2021, the War World saga.
I thought
this
that's
is-
what you were going for.
Yeah, I think it's like really. I think it's because I liked the Grant Morrison Superman in the Authority story. I thought that was fine, and like I like the Authority members, and I like the idea of like, making a new one from kind of from scratch with the parts that we have. But the idea of like Superman going to, for people that don't know, like Gladiator Hell Planet, and then being like, I'm gonna be Superman here. Also, I'm not super powerful, and everybody's like, okay, but we have to like kill all the guys here one by one to continue on in this Gladiator thing. Otherwise, we're not gonna be able to do it. And he's like, no, I'll just be cool, and like everybody will be cool once I'm cool around me. And there's other characters that are doing stuff and other influences on it, but it is one of those very like, in the end, like Superman is this hopeful figure who like inspires people, and I really like that element of it. And like I like Philip County Johnson's good. Yeah, it's a good story. And it's the one where Superman wears the big giant S with like the kind of chains around it.
Yeah, this is very like Kratos looking Superman.
Yeah.
Oh, did they give him a beard? It's always fun.
Nothing
It's
a
really-
superhero
they
comic
did,
book
he's got the
more
5 o'clock
than sticking
shadow.
you on a
Yeah, 'cause
gladiator
this is, like,
planet and
older-
saying, brawl.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's
Yeah, it's
he's
very
one
Superman
of those.
as daddy.
It is very that, and he's like kind of at the end of his, not the end of his rope, but he's like, it seems like maybe this is like, his twilight, because he's kind of losing his powers. And that's when Jonathan was really coming up. So it was an interesting way to play that character, and I've been going through that, and Superman Smashes the Klan, which you already mentioned, right?
Yep.
I think in this, also very good, very digestible, and very fun. I'm surprised they haven't made that into, I guess, did that get any like animated material or something like that?
I'm not
there ever been
sure. I think
any
I've
Not
heard.
seeing anything as I'm.
Yeah,
You can
I'm
also
surprised.
just, as an individual issue for The Man Who Has Everything, everyone knows that one's good.
Yeah.
You can
Yes.
also watch the episode, very faithful adaptation. A lot of it's just line for line out of the comic, which is fun. But-
Yeah, another and more Mongol. He's just the
Yep,
best.
more Mongol.
He's so
Yeah.
cool.
Mongol's a
and
very
also
easy
a
supervillain.
real hater. Yeah.
You want a wild one? Superman War of the Worlds. It is, I believe it's 1998 is when that came out as the 50-year anniversary for both the first appearance of Superman and the War of the Worlds broadcast.
That's so
And it's a
funny.
crossover between them.
That's
And it
fun.
is done in the style of the Golden Age Superman, and as if his appearance onto the world stage is accelerated by the appearance of the Martians, and it is Superman versus the War of the Worlds style Martians.
That's really fun.
But it's that Golden Age can only leap an eighth of a mile style,
Right.
And it's it plays in some very cool elements of like Superman has to deal with the fact that all of a sudden everyone's afraid of the Martians, and he is also an extraterrestrial.
Right.
So like there's this whole like drama that goes on there. There's interesting stuff in relation to like the way the War of the Worlds traditionally ends with like the whole disease factor, and I don't want to like spoil all that, but it's a really cool, and I think it's only like a 48 page, maybe an 80 page story, so it's not like that long by itself.
Have you guys been reading the Absolute run?
Yes,
Not
yeah.
Superman, but I've been reading
Yeah.
some of the other ones.
I think I'm caught up on Absolute Superman. It still feels like it's sort of building up steam, but I like what they're doing with him, and that they're like, what if we started him off in so much of a worse position, and we made the Earth he's coming to so much more realistically unpleasant, and then he's still going to become Superman in the end. I saw a panel at I want to say C2E2 this year that was just like all the Superman writers and also Dan Mora, just all talking, and the guy who was currently in running the Absolute run talked about like, we got like a little taste of the Kents in this most recent issue, but of course it was ripped away from him. But like half of the fun of writing this has been that we're building up this this Kal-El to become the Superman, the beacon of hope we all know about, even though he's starting from such a darker place in this like poisoned timeline warped by Darkseid. And I was like, oh, you are going to let him be hopeful in the end. Okay, I'm sold. I'm in. But the Absolute Wonder Woman run is the one that's actually like really good. So I would recommend that one. If you
Wow,
haven't
that's a
caught up
real
with it.
shade to
is
put on the Absolute Martian Manhunter.
Martian
one.
Oh, I am
Manhunter.
Best one I've
trying
heard.
Absolute Martian Manhunter, but Absolute Wonder
Yeah.
Woman is like pound for
Absolute
pound.
Wonder
I've been
Woman is
having more
great,
fun with it.
And it
I'm
just
still
won
not
the big-
sure
yeah.
where Martian Manhunter is. Well, Mindhunter is entirely
yeah.
going, but
If we're looking for any other recommendations, I've got one. It's not actually Superman, but it's so goddamn close it has to be mentioned, which is the Alan Moore run of Supreme, which is the book that he did right before he did Tom Strong. He took the Rob Liefeld Supreme character, who was this over the top like just in all regards Superman parody, and then turned it into this love letter to 60s like Superman, and like the first story is basically a history lesson about comics from the perspective of a character who knows that he exists in a world that has been revised.
wow.
And it's really cool. It is difficult to find all the trades these days, and certainly difficult to get all the issues. And because of it came out right when Rob Liefeld was kicked out of Image the first time, and so like its publishing arc is like all over the place. Like digitally, you can only get a couple issues, but if you can find the trades for it, it is really good, and it is a really cool story about a Superman type character at a time when Superman, like this was like a little bit after the death and return of Superman, so like the triangle era of Superman was very different than like the classic take, and this was Alan Moore just like getting all of his thoughts out about Superman and comics in general.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Solid.
and
Well,
speaking of Tom Strong, you remind me of the Terrifics. If people want to read a story that's not necessarily about Superman, but is about other characters that you meet in this movie, the Terrifics is like a kind of, it's hard to describe without calling it, like it's not a parody. It's a pastiche of the Fantastic Four, but by way of Mr. Terrific and Metamorpho in this, and then 2 other characters that I imagine we'll see pretty soon in some DCU property. But yeah, it's by Jeff Lemire and Ivan Rice. It's great, and it's very fun. I like that it's got a lightness to it that is entertaining, and it introduces a lot of these other characters like Tom Strong and sillier ones.
Seconded.
Nice. Well, on that note, I think we'll get to what will probably be our last question for the podcast, but I think if we all put our brains together on this one, we just might. Gentlemen, you've probably wondered why I've gathered you here today. We're going to stop the Superman. This question comes from Virgil's Red Boots to all. If you had to defeat Superman without using kryptonite, how do you think it could be done?
We have to work on our fake Baravian accents first.
Yeah.
But I think we can.
Here's the problem. It is unfortunately super easy, and it is the thing
That's
that Lex
true.
is banking on all movie, which is that Superman cannot resist people in distress. Like, they don't even need to be innocents in distress at this point. He's gone on record being like, just because, you know, this country has done some fucked up stuff doesn't mean the people don't deserve to have their lives saved. You can just fabricate any disaster, and Superman will go and deal with it, and then you have him right where you want him. Put any person in peril, and you have him on the ropes. It is unfortunately far too easy to fuck with Superman without even using kryptonite.
Yeah, it is kind of the go-to move. Like, if you look at the first Christopher Reeves movie of, well, we have to have 2 crises on sort of opposite ends of the globe and or country. Just because Superman is fast, but can he be fast enough to solve both problems? Probably not.
Jimmy's falling off a collapsing dam, and Lois cannot get out of her car. These are equivalent crises, and only one of them is worth rewinding time over.
Yeah, it's tricky because, like, I feel like one of the things this movie does that I did want to ask, does Superman need to breathe air? How does this usually play out?
This is a great question
so-
that I also had watching the nanite situation
receipts?
go down. Yes, Case, please.
Okay, so there's the cutoff point of 1986 with Crisis on Infinite Earth. So pre-Crisis on Infinite Earth, he definitively did not need to breathe air, but it was also like goofy space magic where he could like move planets and it wasn't a big deal.
He's breathing luminiferous ether, actually.
Right. Now, post-Crisis, initially what they introduced was the idea that he had to hold his breath for an extended period of time, and so that's why, like in Superman Exile, which is like the first version of the War World saga, where he encountered Mongol and also the Eradicator for the first time, he like went out with like breathing apparatus. Like he could fly in space, but he just needed a breathing mask. Exactly. However, then post Death and Return of Superman, there was this period where he was being supercharged with solar radiation, and as a result, he at one point was in space and was like had the wind knocked out of him. And what he had realized that his breath had become so strong that he could hyperoxygenate his blood and thus not require air in his lungs to be able to continue functioning for some extensive amount of time. And so I believe that is the current state of the character. They may fluctuate back and forth on if he has to hold his breath or not. I think they addressed it fairly well in this movie where even if he doesn't need it to survive, it doesn't feel pleasant not having air in his lungs. And so they point out they surprised him, he didn't get a breath and all that, but they have presented an explanation in the comics for how he's able to function without air.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I was curious, and I guess in the movie, it is one of those things that we never, we don't see him actually suffocate. We just see him struggling, and the goons are like, he needs to breathe air. And I could see a world where he's like, oh no, I don't need it. You guys just assumed that, I guess. But
3 hours
it was
later,
annoying.
they're like,
I didn't
he's got
like
to tip
it.
over.
But
They definitely sold that as being a profoundly unpleasant experience, regardless of whether or not it was actually going to kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough with Superman though, and not getting into the tough part about how I would have to kill Superman is the way that you always think about, or the way that the one thing that Lex didn't do in this movie, I guess without he didn't do too much Red Sun stuff, but no magic or hexes and things that he's traditionally vulnerable against. But then I need to figure out how to do that, and that seems pretty tough. And I don't have I'm not a character with natural magical aptitude.
It's really hard to talk backwards like Satana does. You can't just say, oh man.
The phonemes aren't built that way.
And I'm not. Yeah, she's I forget if she's fully magic person or half magic person now, but even she's got it in her DNA, and I just don't. I mean, I've never checked in my family line, but I don't think I'm homo magi or whatever it is. I would like to imagine that the other way to beat Superman is I feel like the the prison's a really good shot at it, and not even the Mr. or not the
Metamorpho stuff with the kryptonite.
Yeah, forget about Metamorpho. Just the idea of like a big prison that's in another dimension.
Yep.
That should work.
Just
as
deprive
long
him
as
of
you don't
sunlight
open it.
and-
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't put the switch on the inside, and then he's just
Yeah.
I mean, Phantom Zone. We basically just reinvented the Phantom Zone first principles at that point.
Yeah. I mean, there is always the question of, like, if this is the pre-crisis photovoltaic versus, like, the post-crisis photosynthetic approach to his, absorption of sunlight. In a scenario where it's photovoltaic and you could just, like, deprive him of sun immediately and he would run out of power, or if you just were able to modify the wavelength of sunlight so it was red sunlight radiation, and apparently just deactivate his powers, then you're in good shape. But if it is the post-crisis scenario where he's acting like a battery, then that's way more difficult. Like, there was a story with Mon-El, like, who is a character who's like Superman, where he was in the future, imprisoned by Ra's al Ghul, in a room with red sun, and was shot with a lead bullet, and he's a Daxamite, and so lead.
So
actually
they're
is
susceptible
like
to lead. It's like kryptonite.
Yeah. But it was still requiring an extensive period of time for the wound to become a mortal wound, and they had to, like, keep on checking on him as he was just being bathed.
Keep shooting him.
Yeah.
We only had one bullet. We got to make it count. My dad has a favorite moment from the Legion of Superheroes comic that I just want to mention, which I don't know which run. It's just it's Element Lad's greatest moment. All the Daxamites have been, like, mind controlled, and they're attacking, and he's like, well, that's not good. All right, let's see how much lead I need to add to the atmosphere of the planet before they all fall out of the sky. 1 part per million, 2 parts per million, 3 parts per million, guys. 3 parts per million is fine. They all just plummet. And he's like, all right, we're good. Changes it back and everything's fine. It's just like, oh yeah, the Legion is really like, it's like a Swiss Army knife. Every individual superhero is so specific, but when it's the right situation, oh baby.
So if I could posit a culmination of all of the ideas we've thrown out here into what would be this podcast scheme to defeat Superman without kryptonite, in a world where we don't have access to magic, but we presumably have access to other dimensions of some kind. It seems like that technology
that seems
exists.
easier to get.
You need to get 2 crises simultaneously happening, push Lois off of one building and Jimmy off of the other. I don't know, whatever you want to do. And both of them need to fall directly into portals that open into some sort of pocket dimension. Ideally 2 different pocket dimensions, because, you want to play the odds a little bit here, so that Superman has to go into one and then can't get into the other, which would be.
And we need to make sure that,
Spider-Man.
and we need to make sure that Superman does not call for help and get his friends on the line, because that is always the part that screws us up. Is like, we always focus too hard on Superman, and then we forget that he has all these friends and people who like him for some reason. So it's like he rescues
so a third
Jimmy,
crisis somewhere
Batman
else
swings
that
in
the
to
rest
save
of the
Lois.
Justice League is dealing with.
Yeah, that's the
Infinite
thing.
Crisis.
We have Darkseid on the horn, and then we're like, Superman, you
Mm.
can't deal with Darkseid. You have to be over here saving Jimmy Olsen from falling off this building.
Worst nightmare, Guy Gardner saves the day.
It really
Yeah,
seems
and
like
then-
the solution is just every single DC villain simultaneously enacts a plot somewhere in the planet or space, and then you just gotta hope for the best on one of them.
I mean, really, the real way to defeat Superman has been documented in Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, where you need to make him break his code, and then his own moral code will forbid him from continuing to be Superman. So if you contrive a scenario where, like, Mxyzptlk turns evil and he has to deal with that shit, he'll just be like, I can't be Superman anymore. Okay, bye, everybody. And then we're fine. We win.
Nando, you had a.
I was just gonna say, like, we just, whatever we do, when he goes in the thing, we have to break the machine to get him out. Like, we can't
immediately.
keep it around for fun. Like, Mr. Terrific or somebody's gonna hack into it. Like, I feel like if we smash it, you probably can't rebuild it. And then we also don't have to worry about it, forming a big thing and destroying the whole city. But we have to be very. It's got to be very final. There's no bargaining we're doing, nothing like that. So get everything you want out of the dimensional prison thing, because it's gone forever after this.
Yes, now is not the time for monologues, but it is time for this podcast. Nando and Case, thank you guys so much for joining us. We've got links to all your business down in the show notes. People want to hear more from you. But as a reminder, Nando is of Nando v Movies, in Case of Men of Steel podcast for the Superman-related things out there. I don't usually do the outro, so Blue, if we could simultaneously cause 2 crises to occur so that one of the 2 of us can swoop in.
Red has to decide which intro or which outro she's going to salvage.
I've been hoisted by my own petard. Thank you.
I'll be dangling off a building. You'll be locked in a car.
Great. Okay.
Equal crises.
Great. I'll do all the work of getting you out of the collapsing dam, and then when you die, I'll just reverse time and undo all of my hard work, and we'll just pretend like that never happened. Thank you all so much
Classic.
for listening to this very special bonus episode of the Overly Sarcastic Podcast. We'll be back at some point with another completely normal episode, probably in a week. That's usually how we do these things. As always, our lovely guests, thank you so much for being here. All of your business, as mentioned, is in the show notes below. This was super fun. I love a chance to just gush about a movie that we like. This is probably the most specific bonus episode we've ever done, where it's not just about, like, what's your favorite of this kind of thing? It's like, this movie. We're all talking about this movie. It's basically Movie Struck with extra steps. In any case, I think that's all the stuff I had to cover in the logistics and the stopping the dam from breaking. I've like done a little like cool miniature set thing where I collapsed a bunch of rubble in the way, so it's basically just a second dam, and the water's gonna hit it and just behave really nicely and stop. So until next time, I have been Red.
I've been Blue.
And thank you to our very special guests once again.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Any day that we get to talk about Superman is a good day.
Thanks so much for listening to this Oops All Superman edition of the Overly Sarcastic Podcast. Regular episodes will resume on August 20th, but if you miss us before then, be sure to check out Overly Sarcastic Productions on YouTube. Got a question for the pod? Head over to Ask OSPod on Discord for a chance for your question to be featured in a future episode. If you enjoyed the show, please rate us and leave a review on your preferred podcast platform, and if you really enjoyed the show, consider becoming a patron for even more exclusive benefits. Thanks for listening, and catch the links to our guests, Nando and Case's content down in the show notes below.